Hello, this is part 6 of my Linux command line course. In this video, I will discuss topics of file names, special characters, and quoting. File and directory naming under Linux is very flexible. There's only one printable character that is not allowed in their names, the /, which is reserved for the root directory and as a separator between pieces of a path name. Unfortunately, this flexibility can lead to problems, as most non-alphanumeric characters have special meaning to the shell or the commands, so it is best to avoid them. In general, it is recommended that only the following characters are used to form file and directory names under Linux. Alpha characters, which is the 26 letters of the English alphabet in upper or lower case, digits 0 to 9, the comma and period, and the underscore. Notably, the use of space in file names is not recommended. Space is a special character in the shell where it is used as a separator between command line pieces such as file names and command options. For example, when I create some directories. You could see a shell command line such as this one as a list of words or tokens to be processed by the computer, and space serves a vital purpose visually separating them. This is the default shell behavior. Introducing space in a different context may lead to the command line being misinterpreted. Take the following example. I will attempt to create a blank file called thisexample.txt with a space between words this and example. The command seems to have worked fine, as there was no error, but let's see what has actually happened using the ls command. It turns out that the above command created two files, one named this and one named example.txt. The shell did not interpret the space between this and example as part of a file name, but a separator between two different file names. I need to remove the incorrectly named files and try again. To use a file name with a space in its name, we need to deactivate the normal property of the space character using quotes, for example, by enclosing the entire file name within double quotes. Now the file was created correctly, including the space in the middle of the name. I can use the file name from now on, as long as I remember to use quotes every time with it. The purpose of quotes is to protect special characters from the default interpretation by the shell. This is necessary when the shell's functionality interferes with what we are trying to accomplish. The space in the file name is one such case. There are three quoting styles available: the double quote you have seen me use already, as well as single quote and the backslash. The ls command uses single quotes by default to quote file names with special characters in its output. Single quotes function similarly to the double quotes. For example, now I will remove the file I just created, but this time employing single quotes. Do not confuse the single straight quote, usually found on the keyboard near the Enter key, with the single back quote, usually found on the keyboard near the Escape key, which mean different things to the shell. Single and double quotes must always be used in pairs. Beginners commonly forget to close a quote and become trapped in the command line. For example, I will use the echo command to print a hello world message to the terminal, but forget to close the quote. The message is not displayed when I press enter. Instead, I am presented with a secondary prompt where the shell is inviting me to continue with the above command. Pressing enter again has no effect. What happened? Well, the quote deactivated the normal interpretation of the enter key, which is to run a command. Now enter means just go to the next line. The quote needs to be closed so the next enter key is interpreted by the shell normally as run the command. Notice the extra blank lines in the output, which are the quoted enter key presses. Sometimes you may not want to go ahead with a command that accidentally takes you to the secondary prompt. In such case, you can just press the Ctrl and C key combination to cancel the command without running it. I will repeat the above scenario, but this time cancel the echo command with Ctrl C. The third quote option available is the backslash. Unlike the double or single quotes, which can quote a range of characters enclosed within, the backslash quotes only one character, the one directly following it. Here's how I would create another file with a space in its name, this time quoting just a space with a backslash. The backslash can be used to quote the enter key as well, resulting in a secondary prompt. Here's another echo example where I will type the backslash and press enter right after. I am at the secondary prompt now, and I have a choice to cancel the command through Ctrl-C or proceed with the command by pressing enter. Keep in mind that since the backslash quotes only one character, pressing enter now results in normal behavior which will run the command. Experienced users use quotes to gain access to the secondary prompt, which allows them to visually split long commands so they are easier to read. While quoting is an effective tool to allow spaces in file names, it is best to avoid spaces in file names altogether and use the underscore instead. Let me rename the another example.txt file to replace the space with an underscore. This time I will use the tab to autocomplete the original file name. I'll type A and press tab, and the shell will autocomplete the original file name, backquoting the space for me. It's very convenient that I did not have to remember to quote the space in the file name. If you are not using the autocomplete tab on an ongoing basis, I hope that seeing this has convinced you to embrace it. Some users use the dash in file names, possibly in place of a space. The dash is special to commands where it is used to indicate a command option. For example, when I use the -a option with ls to see all files. The dash indicates a command option only if it appears at the beginning of a command line token. Otherwise, it is not special. For example, here are some directories with dashes in their name. Both directories were created without any issue, and they can be used without any special handling. It is a completely different situation if I try something like this. The problem with the -selfies name is that it begins with a dash. A directory called -selfies was not created because the make directory command interpreted the -selfies token as an option, which it wasn't meant to be. We cannot use quotes to get around this problem, as leading dash is not an issue for the shell, but the command. Let me try it anyway to show you what happens if I use a quote. Although generally considered a bad idea, we can have and use file names that start with a dash. There are two ways to accomplish that. The first method is adding a double dash option to the command line before the troublesome file name. The double dash indicates to the command that anything after that, to the right of it, is not to be interpreted as an option. You can use regular command options with the double dash option. Just make sure that actual options are listed to the left of the double dash. For example, now I will remove the -selfies directory, making the command verbose with the -v option. Unfortunately, autocomplete using tab does not work with path names that start with a dash. I need to type the -selfies name manually. The second method to allow file names with a leading dash in commands relies on changing the file name path. Consider the following. In this case, I wanted to create a regular file named -m. As expected, the command failed as the -m was interpreted as a command option and not a file name, resulting in a missing file error message. On the other hand, the following works fine. Here, I created a file named -m inside the tmp directory without any issue. In this case, the dash was not a problem, as it is not at the beginning of the path name. In order to have a file name which starts with a dash in a relative path name, it needs to be prefixed with a directory. In case of the present working directory, the prefix is /. The -m file was created successfully in my current directory now. In general, the // prefix is redundant in relative path names, but this is one of the few exceptions where it is needed. It is up to you which method you use to deal with dash prefixed file names. The double dash and // prefix methods work equally well with most commands. I prefer the / prefix as it allows the use of filename autocomplete using tab. The space and dash characters are just two examples which illustrate how special characters in file names affect the command line behavior. Even if you may follow good file naming rules yourself, you still need to know how to deal with bad file names, as you may receive files from other people who may not follow sensible naming conventions. Anything appearing in a command line that is not alphanumeric, period, comma, or underscore can have special meaning to the shell. Such meta characters, unless quoted, are intercepted by the shell, where the shell performs an action tied to them, usually replacing them with dynamic content such as file names, command output, variable content, and so on. Meta characters perform vital functions in the command line, and handling them correctly will help you avoid accidental data loss. It will also save you time so you can type commands faster, and it will give you access to advanced command line features. Each shell meta character has its unique purpose and is handled by the shell in a specific way. I have introduced the curly brace meta characters in one of my earlier videos, where I use them to group file names to avoid repeating path names when creating files and directories. For example, I will use the curly braces now to create a number of directories with similar names. The shell processed the above command line by substituting the curly brace expression with a space-separated list of names, which was in turn passed on to the make directory command. In this case, the make directory command received a list of 3 directories to be created, without me having to type the invoices _ prefix multiple times. In this case, the curly braces were not intended to be part of file names, and this scenario demonstrates how meta characters can be useful instead of troublesome. The substitution process is transparent to the user, but we can use the echo statement to see what the curly brace expression was substituted with. Using the echo statement is a common way to safely test or preview how the shell will interpret a command line without actually running it. The shell will substitute curly brace expressions with a list, following the curly brace contents before the actual command is run. In any case, I would not want you to associate the curly brace meta characters with only creating files or directories. Curly braces are a general tool available to us whenever we need a list of names which are not necessarily file or directory names. Here's another example of the curly brace use. The curly braces in this command were substituted with a list of the alphabet letters printed to the terminal by the echo command. You know already that quotes can be used to prevent a shell from processing meta characters. Here's what happens when I use backquotes to quote the curly braces. This time the echo command received the curly braces intact, as the shell was prevented from substituting them by using quotes. We can use the curly braces to match existing file names, which can be useful with commands such as move, copy, remove, etc. But there are specialized meta characters for that, which can match existing file names through wildcard patterns, making them much better for that purpose. I discuss wildcard matching of file names in the next video. Go ahead and check it out if you have a few minutes. Thanks for watching.